We've got the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, Jason Howell, with us on this edition of Farm to Frankfort. Senator Howell, it's great to have you with us this month on Farm to Frankfort. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the district you represent in Frankfort.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate you having me. I'm from the 1st Senate District where I represent the 1st Senate District, which starts over in far true West Kentucky, Fulton County, where I'm from, and picks up Hickman County and then Graves County. You might want to start taking notes because it's going to take a while. I've got Graves County, Callaway County, and then we hop the rivers and go pick up Trigg County, and then we go up the river and pick up Lyon County, and then jag over to the Ohio River and pick up Crittenden County.
Yeah,
so only in politics are you going to have a map that looks like that.
Yeah, no kidding. So a big area, and I like that you mentioned true West Kentucky.
That's
I think
right.
It's funny, we talked to some folks and they're Western Kentucky University, that's West Kentucky. That's South Central Kentucky. You're in true West Kentucky.
It's part of my mission to civilize the rest of Kentucky.
There you go. But that's big ag country out there.
Absolutely.
A lot of row crops. You got the river system down there with the Mississippi and the Ohio, move a lot of crops even on the inland waterways down there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would imagine, I haven't seen any kind of data on it, but I would imagine as a percentage of GDP, my district is more ag-based than anybody else's district in the state.
Yeah.
Just the way it's configured.
And Eddie, where you're from is pretty big ag country too.
It is. Of course, we have to laugh. Your dad always tells me that I'm from Western Kentucky and he's from West Kentucky. If I ever say that, he wants to correct me.
I'm sure he does.
There's a whole other state out there.
I'm sure he does.
But we just appreciate the work that you do in Frankfort and working with us in agriculture. And you've got an ag background, and I think that's so important for us. Somebody that understands what happens on the farm, and it's important to us, Senator, and we just appreciate your connection to ag, and you just got reelected, so we're glad that you're reelected and going to be back again, so we're excited for you to come back to Frankfort.
To your point, Eddie, it is important. You need to be able to speak the language. And unfortunately, we have fewer and fewer people with ag backgrounds in the legislature, so it's really important for us to kind of continue to stick our nose into all of these issues to make sure that our interests are properly taken care of.
We appreciate what you do.
Absolutely. We love working with you in Frankfort.
I'm not shy about sticking my nose into issues.
Hey, you always dig into the issues. There's never a lack of digging and understanding the issues. We appreciate that. But, as chairman, what's some of your priorities as the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I would like to see us continue to do. One, we did a lot of work with our veterinarian shortage in the past couple of sessions. 2 years ago, we actually rewrote, Matt Cook took the lead on rewriting the veterinarian code to kind of update it and bring it into modern medicine and give our veterinarians more support that way. This year, we passed a couple of pieces of legislation to look at some help, especially in the rural vet space, with some loan forgiveness to structure a program in and to help with that. And we took a good hard look at putting a vet school in Kentucky. I sponsored a bill, Chairman Heath sponsored a bill, the similar language, that did not get through the Senate. It got through the House, but did not get through the Senate. But what came out of it is for Council for Post-Secondary Education to study this summer by hiring an independent firm to evaluate the need for a vet school in the state of Kentucky, and then we'll evaluate that. So they're supposed to have that work done by December, so we'll have a little time to dig through that leading into this coming session.
Yeah, and the interim is when a lot of that type of work gets done. A lot of folks, they know we're in session January to March or January to mid-April, depending long or short session. But so much of the work does get done right now, in that interim between June and December.
It does. And, very few decisions that you make in a rush end up being as good a decision as it could have been if you'd had time to really think through all the different things. And that we spend a lot of time with that in the interim. We meet June through November.
Yeah.
So we meet monthly with every committee, and we'll dig in. We'll bring somebody in where we might have 10 to 15 minutes in a committee meeting in session we'll bring them in and give them the whole 2 hours sometimes, and just go, all right, let's just dig down and way down in the weeds and look through all of the issues that we need to look at.
I think that's important that people get to come in and you get to ask the questions, because I know when you're in session, y'all have so much stuff going on. There's so many people coming at you.
Yeah.
And in the interim time that you can talk about the issues, and people can come in and talk to y'all, and then y'all can do research after that.
It's
and
like
it's not a deadline right there on the backside.
Yeah, it's like drinking from a fire hose in the session and a garden hose in the interim. So.
Yeah, having 1,000 bills filed in 30 days, it makes it difficult to keep track of every one.
It's a lot of velocity, isn't it? Volume and velocity.
Yeah, it is. Something you and I have talked a lot about, and Eddie and I and several of our guests have talked a lot about, is rural economic development. Specifically, kind of what we talk about is rural agricultural economic development. Part of that is Riverport funding. I appreciate all your work the last 2 years.
Absolutely.
And it really came to fruition this year, getting the $20 million for the river ports. And I know you've got ports in Eddyville, all the way over through your district. Like I said, I think you touch as much waterways that transport goods as anybody.
Yeah, it's a really interesting district from that respect. I grew up on the river. I remember sitting in beans lines with my dad and granddad when I was about that tall, just watching it. And it never gets old. But I was really surprised. Kentucky has the second most navigable shoreline, navigable waterway of any. It's more shoreline, second most shoreline of any state in the country, next to Alaska. We've got a lot.
Yeah, we do.
My district has 4 commercially navigable rivers in it, with the Mississippi, Cumberland, Tennessee, and Ohio. So that's a lot
important to us in agriculture.
That's a lot of water.
It is.
And every one of those that have a river port on them, I'd say agriculture is one of their biggest throughput systems, because they get it both ways.
Absolutely. And when what you know is all you know, you tend to not know what you don't know. That sounds like a Yogi Berraism there, doesn't it? But I always took it for granted that how easy it was to get grain to market.
Right.
That's right.
We could almost see Bungie from our house. Yeah. But then when I moved back closer to home and I moved to Murray, and people were trucking to Bungie and Hickman, that was an hour away. That was a real wake-up call. They're trucking grain to Hickman and to Cairo, Illinois, and I really then realized, one, how good we had it, but 2, how important it was to not only maintain the facilities that we do have, but try to build out some facilities in some other areas to take some of the pressure off our producers.
I really think it's forward thinking on y'all's part to invest that money, because it is an investment.
Right.
It gets our agriculture crops out here. It gets inputs in, but it's not just agriculture. There are a lot of industries that use that, and it's an economic driver. And I think the rural economic piece that you're talking about, Kyle, those river ports can play into that.
It is, because a lot of your river ports are in rural areas, and there's a lot of river in rural areas too that could be developed into this as needs arise. And we got to looking at this. We traditionally would drop $500,000 into river port funding every year. And Missouri we have 8, I think, active public ports, 8 or 9.
Yeah, we've got 10 public ports. I think one of them.
I'm always off one on the number.
Yeah. But I think one of them's developing.
Yeah.
So I think it's established.
Work in progress.
That's right.
But we spread $500,000 amongst those ports. Missouri has 14 public ports, and they put more than $500,000 in their least funded public port. And this becomes a great surprise to you. Guess what happens around all 14 of those well-funded ports in the state of Missouri?
Job creation,
economic development comes in. Not just traditionally grains and aggregates, coal going out, aggregates going out, fertilizers coming in, road salt coming in, the aggregate movement. But they have businesses that bring rolled steel up and down the river and this sort of thing. And I think that we've missed out on that. But with the way the changes are coming globally, there's more focus on moving goods up and down our inland waterways. And because we have available space, I think it positions us uniquely to take advantage of it. We're, a 6-hour drive from 60% of the population. There's damn lies, and statistics, but we touch so much of the population base, and especially in the western part of the state, and my part of the state, you can come all the way from the Port of New Orleans to Hickman, Kentucky, Wickliffe, Kentucky without ever hitting a lock. So it's really economical to bring these barges up and down the river to that point.
Yeah, so thank you all and all your colleagues for that support to get the funding, one-time funding. Hopefully we can continue to work on that issue. I know we will. And what's kind of step two, I guess, kind of in your mind for rural agricultural economic development?
Yeah, this is a big deal for me in my district, in my hometown. I'm from Fulton County. And when my parents graduated high school back in 1962, our census was roughly 15,000 people, and now it's about 6,500. Right. And that's just been a long slide for a number of factors. A lot of them agriculture bases. We moved to more mechanization. There aren't many people that chop beans anymore. Right. Or in our case, in that western part of the county, chop cotton. Those days are gone. We aren't as labor intensive in agriculture, and that combined with NAFTA and a number of other issues, our population has just continued to decline. And areas like Fulton County are still viable, but if we slide too much more on a population base, we won't have enough people around. Yeah. And this is important for all of Kentucky, but it's vitally important, in my opinion, for our ag communities as well and our ag producers, because it's more than just a job. It's a way of life. It is. And they live there. Every farmer lives where they farm. Yeah. And their kids go to school where they farm. And their spouses, if they don't work on the farm with them, have a job in that community. And there comes a point where you lose too much of the community around your ag producers, and it puts a lot of pressure on those ag producers to make a choice. We don't want to be like certain parts of the Delta where there just aren't any people.
Right. Yeah, and here's another important thing to think about. We're just 6 years away from another census, and based on where the population is based on how we get our representation in Frankfort and in Washington. So we need people in rural areas to live and to work to keep that representation viable in Frankfort and Washington from representing those rural counties. So
I'll refrain from editorializing on how accurate I think this last census was.
But
especially in a lot of our rural counties.
Yeah. Well, something we've talked a lot about, Eddie, and we've actually, we went to Illinois, we've been to some other states and looked at some of their economic development incentives and kind of packages around kind of incentivizing agriculture-based businesses. Specifically because of that indirect job impacts, what we kind of have referred to it as, like a grain elevator might employ a dozen people, but they're supporting thousands of farmers from dozens of counties surrounding that with a lot of money.
And those dollars stay in that community too.
That's thousands of farmers, thousands of farm workers.
Yeah.
Small businesses,
mechanics. The derivative impact is important.
And that's a good point. Yes.
Our small businesses, I think you see it in your county, your home county. Small businesses are struggling right now to stay in business. It happens in my community too, and it's sad to see those things happen because it's what made our community, our rural communities, what they are. And so, if we can get some of that economic development back, maybe we can get those small businesses to thrive in those communities.
It's something we talk about a lot, and I would like to take a look at how we do economic development. I think Secretary Knoll does a great job with it. I enjoy working with him. But some of the things that we're talking about looking at, he should probably be fired if he got involved with economic development because of the way we structure economic development in Kentucky. It's all how many direct jobs come. And we ignore a lot of these things. Going to that battery plant in Glendale, we talked about 5,000 jobs, but then the second breath was all of these support industry jobs that come in, and we add that to the overall economic impact of a big project like that. But we don't do that for existing industry at all, but in an ag world, we don't do that because those farmers are already existing. So we don't credit them out properly like we would a new business like this battery plant at Glendale.
Yeah, well, I
think that's something we really need to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And all these economic development packages, are just about all of them, they're set up through statute. So that's something we're looking at in current law. Does there need to be something new? Can there be something tweaked in current law? But you
Or
are
maybe
right,
just do something additional to what we're doing.
Right.
You know, what we've had some success with
Yeah.
turning the table and building on job creation. So I don't know that we want to bleed away resources from something
Right.
that may be working, but we need to broaden it out into and kind of have a macroeconomic development arm and a microeconomic development
Yeah,
arm.
yeah, we have
As far
had
as job
several,
creation goes.
yeah, several consecutive good years for
That's
economic development, but how can we look at a agricultural specific, whether it's that large processor for livestock, or whether it's a large grain elevator, or ethanol, or sustainable aviation fuel, or whatever it might be. We have had a lot of success in economic development in Kentucky. It's how do we get it into the agriculture industry and maybe into some of our rural areas that really need those jobs.
You know, it's difficult for large because so much of our population, politically and otherwise, is not in a ag producing environment. It's hard for them to understand this. I'm really curious to see the sustainable aviation fuel when that goes, and it will. It's not if, it's when. I had a good meeting on that about 3 weeks ago. How that impacts UPS and FedEx and our major airports in
Amazon.
Kentucky.
Yeah.
That is going to be visible, and it's not going to put more jobs at FedEx or UPS or the airport. So it doesn't have that impact. It's very, in my mind, it's very similar from an economic development standpoint. But I think we're going to really show a value-added component to those end users of the aviation fuel, but also to our farmers from a price support standpoint.
Yeah, that's what I think we're working on in Congress,
That's
trying to
right.
make sure that we have a domestic feedstock, corn, beans, wheat, canola, whatever it might be, making sure that this sustainable aviation fuel is made from a domestic feedstock that we can grow in Kentucky.
Yeah, we don't need to import it from someplace else. We need to use what we grow here.
Absolutely.
And if we can get something in Kentucky, there's nothing better than to get an end user for ag products.
Absolutely.
Within our boundaries of our state. You know that. We've seen it many, many times over. And for whatever it is, if we can use our products and process them here in Kentucky, it's a win for us.
It is, and it's a value-added win, too.
Absolutely.
Because those businesses, they may not have many jobs, but I have a feeling that a lot of those jobs at this sustainable aviation production facility are going to be really good jobs.
Oh, yeah, and it's going to, like Eddie was mentioning, it's going to add value to that bushel of grain, whatever
and it can
grain
save
crop
on
it
transportation costs or whatever.
And it's going to put a lot of money in the school systems of the places where these businesses arise.
Yeah.
You know, it has that. It's cliche at this point, but rising tides lifts all boats.
That's right.
You know, it supports your school systems and your local tax base and economy as well.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that we've seen this looking at other states and some of the things they do, especially in the Midwest with their production facilities. They don't just in Iowa. They don't just grow hogs. They grow hogs and then they make sausage.
right.
And we grow a lot of hogs and cattle and chickens, but we don't make many steaks.
Yeah.
And I think we saw that a couple of years ago. We missed a golden opportunity to have a slaughter facility in Kentucky. We have more beef cattle, I believe, than any state east of the Mississippi.
That's correct.
And we don't have a major slaughter facility. And this would have opened up, not only would it have supported all of our cattle farmers here, it would have created a lot of good jobs in the community, but there have also been a lot of derivative jobs that came off of this. Right now, at least in our part of the state, when we raise cows to a certain point, then we ship them to Texas to finish them out.
Right.
So we could put finishing facilities here. You don't finish finish those cattle with hay.
Not a lot of
times.
grain.
No, it's a lot of the grain that we produce.
But because we can't slaughter here, and because we don't have that infrastructure, we lose a lot of other economic opportunities. And you're not going to put a finished lot in Jefferson County. You're going to put it in Fulton County or some of your smaller counties that need that support.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. So we've talked a lot about kind of agriculture-based stuff. And obviously that's where we're the voice of agriculture, but We represent hundreds of thousands of members all across Kentucky. What's some kind of, what is this interim looking like and into the 2025 session, just kind of from a broad standpoint? I know everything changes, but what's kind of your crystal ball of going to be some of the big issues next session?
Yeah, so the interim is everybody's goodie bag too. Everybody's got an axe to grind or a special interest that they want to focus on. They try to get it on the interim calendar. A couple of things that I think that we will see going into this session is we are looking again at Department of Juvenile Justice and continuing to work on some things there. And we don't think that necessarily helps us because people that have grandkids think their grandkids are perfect.
Absolutely.
So, I'm smart enough to ever contradict that. But here's how that impacts you. If your grandkids are going to school with somebody that needs juvenile facility help and they're not getting it, then that's hard on your grandchild in that school as well. It affects their learning, it affects their environment, and it really affects those kids that need that help, and they need that support, and they need that whatever they are not getting in order to turn the corner and be productive members of society rather than a problem with society. Yeah. So that's something that I think we'll take a good hard look at. Everything we do at this point is focused on reducing our income tax. Mm-hmm. And making sure that we put things in place to hit our milestones to ultimately take our income tax to zero. That's the goal. Right. But we're doing it in a fiscally responsible manner, and we're not going out there and just dropping it to zero automatically without the price support. Right. We don't want to have to pay a nickel a bushel tax on every bushel of soybeans to go ahead and offset the.
We don't want to do that.
I didn't figure that'd be much. There's a lot of support for taking the income tax to zero. Yeah. There's not a lot of support for the other stuff to take it all out. Yeah. So the key is to kind of grow your economy into that consumption base without bankrupting a state too much. Right. So I think that's something we'll take a good look at too. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be a busy interim. We know that it was a busy interim last year with all those task force, but kind of just wrapping us up here, any kind of just like words of wisdom or advice?
Yeah, one thing you talked about, you just mentioned task force. There's a workforce development task force that I'm serving on this interim. Everybody talks about job creation's great, but you got to have somebody to fill the spot.
That's true
and
too. Yeah.
That's something that I think we'll take a good hard look at. I think we're already coalescing around a concept that you don't have to go to college to make a really good living for your family. And I think we're making a critical mass. When I was growing up, I was raised that you wouldn't be a failure if you didn't go to college, but we expect you to go to college. Because that was the key in. And now my peers that were raised that way are fine with their kids going and being a welder. Because that welding certificate produces a lot more money than that English certificate.
And they're in need. And
everything breaks down to supply and demand.
That's right. Yeah.
And we're becoming more technical. We're becoming more with increased ability to reduce labor, with efficiencies, with robotics and everything else in our manufacturing facilities. We're not needing backs to build tires. That's all done by machine. Right. But we need somebody that's smart enough to run them and trained enough to run them. And then we need to support with that. We need more electricians in it. We need more computer programmers in it. And I grew up in a community that had 2 tire plants, one in Mayfield and one in Union City. And a lot of my friends' dads worked there. And they made a really good living for their families until their bodies broke down when they were my age. Yeah. And being able to make a good living for your family in this era of industry is really important. A lot of those businesses are in rural Kentucky.
That's right.
It's something we need to take a real hard look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll look into it.
That's right.
We're going to work with you. We're looking forward to it this summer.
Look forward to it as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Good to be with you.